Shalom, when instead of source by giving no praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Kakadash, double honors the apostle great most, and an honesty brothers doing the work of the most on truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the raw name of whom the world ignorantly calls God Jehovah Yahweh. His raw name is Yahweh. His son's true name is Yahweh Shai. And when we pray Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba meaning in, Ha meaning the, and Sham meaning name. So Yahweh, the name of Yahweh Shai. Now this one's called, I should have been Berean minded. Right, and this is more so just for young brothers coming in, right? And this is like going back to a time when I was still very young in the faith, and basically it was nothing to do with the scriptures. But then how in this thing of us, there are things of the world, right? Like the economy that we look at, like certain, just certain, as I think the word is esoteric. Let me just look that word. Right, yeah. So this, I'll bring it to this tab here. Right, esoteric, right, intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with specialized knowledge or interest. Right, so a lot of the things that we look into, as part of watching, right, we watch the news, we go into this, we go into that, right, things that back up the scriptures. Right now, what I used to do, when you're young, you got that zeal, you always talking, right, is I would talk to people, right, about things that I personally hadn't gone into. What was I doing? I was just parroting, right? And then basically what would happen is those people would ask me one question, and then I would end up being like right? Now, of course, with with this thing of ours, one of the things that we always have to remember is that we're ambassadors for this truth, right? Whatever it is, let's say you're a certain way at the job, right? And they see you at the camp, and let's say you're an asshole at the job, and then they see you at the camp, right? They're gonna associate this whole thing of ours with being an asshole. You're like, yeah, but he's an asshole. He's trying to tell people to be better, but he's an asshole, right? No, I'm just using that as an example, just to kind of put the point, right? But basically, back then, I was showing, a lack of diligence, right? If we're going to be, speaking about things, primarily the main thing that we speak about is this truth, right? But as in, like, to people of the world, is you are going to get people that are going to be asking you follow-up questions, right? So if it's a a topic that one's not familiar with, hey, I'm not really too familiar with that, right? But once again, that when it's brand new, you want to talk, you want to tell everyone everything. Oh yeah, this, our economy is gonna crash. Oh, this is gonna happen. Oh, that's gonna happen. Now, are these things true? Yeah, they are true, right? But then don't be surprised when the guy then comes back to you and says, yeah, but look at this graph. This graph says that the economy is doing better, right, than ever before, right? And then basically needing to have that wherewithal to be like, okay, cool, yeah, but actually when you look at this, when you look at that, actually it's really unhealthy at the moment, right? And then having also the example of the 2008 crash, where when you watch that film, the Wolf, not Wolf of Wall Street, was it a Wolf? No. The Big Short. Right? When you watch The Big Short, right, it shows you how they knew that the system had crashed a long time before everyone else did, right? They were just like, I don't get it. I don't understand, what's happening, right? But if you use that as an example, it's like, look, and when you look at that crash, this happened, and then there was a lot of, stock market manipulation, right? Then you've got, a backup. But once again, if, we're to speak anything, right, we have to speak things that we know, right, and not just to parrot things, okay, and more so, right, especially when it comes to these scriptures, right? And that's what you see what some of these people do, right? So enough of the intro, right? This is the word diligence, right? Steady, earnest, energetic effort, right? Devoted and painstaking work and application to accomplish an undertaking, right? So, hey, looking into certain things, it's painstaking, man. Right, that's why, for instance, in Ecclesiastes 12th chapter, it speaks about, much study is weariness of the flesh. Okay, so going into things, it is painstaking, but actually to get salvation, right? Things ain't easy, right? In Second Ezra, it likens it to having fire on one side and deep waters on the other. Okay, and then basically a thin narrow path, but it ends up by saying, but if there's a city at the end of it, if you never go through that path, how then can you enter? Okay, so diligence, 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 right? Especially when it comes to these scriptures, right? But also, if you're to be making certain statements to people in the world, right? Not necessarily of the scriptures, but of things. Just hey, you got to be ready to give an answer. Okay, so I'm going to get a few precepts, right? First beginning off just in general, but then more so highlighting, being diligent with these, in the scriptures, right? And where this concept of, be Berean mind or be of, of Berea, right? Which is, I don't know if I said this was inspired. I was watching which called the Apostles Tar and Apostle Rhymer both mentioned this. Right, it sparked my thought, right? So it says Acts 17, 10 to 12. It says, and the brethren immediately sent away Paul and Silas by night unto Berea, who coming thither went into the synagogues of the Jews. These were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily whether these things were so. Okay, so that's what the church of Thessalonica did, right? They searched the scriptures. It was like, okay, what we're reading here is true. And as Apostle, I believe it was Apostle Tahar was saying, it wasn't because they didn't trust Paul. No, they trusted him. However, they wanted to confirm it from themselves. But then also, what happens when you confirm it for yourself, right, is you understand it for yourself. Okay, you ask your own questions. You're like, okay, cool. What does it mean? It's like, Paul, I believe you when you said that, but this bit, what does it mean when it says that? I'll give you an example. When you compare it to Deuteronomy 28 and 68, right? Oh, what the hell's happened there? You compare it Deuteronomy 28:68. Right, it says, and the Lord shall bring thee again into Egypt with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Right? So now you may have heard that, Egypt now represents America, right? The ships, oh yeah, the slave ships, yeah. But then what do you call it? When like a vocab type says, but what does no man shall buy you? What does that mean? Right? If you've never gone into the precept yourself, you're gonna be like, what? And the reason I remember this one, because this is what happened one time. I was just reading the scripture. I was like, what does it mean? No man shall buy it. And it just wouldn't make. I couldn't get anything. I looked at the blue letter. Right, I was like, to get. It was like, it looks like it says what it says, but we were bought. It didn't make sense, right? But then looking into things for yourself, right? And then asking the follow-up questions, you can then be like, oh, okay, cool, that's the understanding, right? And the understanding of this is, right, let's go straight to the precept, right? All Quaker English, no man shall set you free, right? Deuteronomy 32 and 6. Do ye thus require Yahweh, O foolish people and unwise? Is not he thy father that hath bought thee? Right? Hath he not made thee and established thee? Right? So the buy here represents redemption, as that precept in Deuteronomy 32 and 6 says. Psalm 74 1 and 2, Isaiah 11 and 2 Peter 2 and 1. Okay, just some examples, right? So I said I'm going to get a few examples of just a bit which are a little bit more generic, and then ones which this is all really pertaining to the scriptures just anyway, but it's things that we can apply, especially speaking about things in the world. We don't want to be given an impression, right, as I was when I was first getting in, speaking things, like I said, speaking things not of the scriptures, right, but like finance and this and that, which I didn't fully understand for myself. I had no reason to be speaking on those things, because then I'd get asked follow-up questions. I wouldn't have the answers. Okay, so this is 2 Timothy 2:15. Study to show thyself approved unto the Most High, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the work of truth. Right? So studying. Right? If there's a topic that one, because is it the Spirit has it whereby different archeum go into different things. Different brothers have the different spirits, different lots. right? If there's a specific, topic, a thing that, the Spirit has you going into, go into it, right? And if it has it, for arcing for insight into the finance, they're able to answer all of them finance questions. Yeah, but yeah, this, but that, all of that, like which we are supposed to have, a general understanding of certain things, general understanding of finance, general understanding of, history and maps and stuff like that, right? Because once again, especially with the history, you don't want a vocab type to come up, and ask questions, right? And then you're just there like, oh, right? Which even me saying that, I'm like, yeah, I need to go into the history, right? It's Colossians 3:23, and whatsoever you do it heartily as to Lord and not unto men. Once again, primarily, going into these scriptures, right? It's like, studying, it's like, do it with all your heart, as this precept, might rather, this precept says, Ecclesiastes 9:10, whatsoever thy hand find to do it with thy might, right? For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest, right? So basically, not just like winging it, it's like actually taking care of, what it is, what our conversation is, with the word there being anastrophe, I believe it is, how we carry ourselves and stuff like that, okay? 1 Thessalonians 5:21, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, right? But and like I said, now I'm going to start moving more just into the things, like very specifically of these scriptures, because we are getting into that time when actually, which it's always time for 100% truth. It's always the time for 100% truth, right? But we're in those last days, and if people that are believing the MOTB ain't what we say it is, if people aren't believing that the names of Yahweh Shem Yahushua are important, right? Then hey, and if it's to you. I was trying to find a way to say it, but that's on you, right? It's not like you've not had the warning. It's Revelation 1:3. Blessed is he that readeth, right? When you look into this word here, readeth, right? G314 and ginosko, right? To know again, to read, to distinguish between, to recognize, to know accurately, to acknowledge, to read, right? Now, I remember one of the ones on directly on the blue that I believe was to understand, right? But this is the point, to know accurately, which you could say that's to understand, to know accurately, right? So not to be like, oh, it could be this or it could be that. No, it's like, well, there's certain things in these precepts where it's plain, right? Because the scriptures do say we see through a dark glassly, roughly paraphrasing, right? So there are things that we don't know, but there are things that the Lord has made just abundantly plain, right? Which we shouldn't be having to have these back and forths, now, to this day. But once again, you have certain people that just ain't reading, right? They're just mocking. They're being parrots, okay? They're just parroting everything that they hear without going into it for themselves, right? But then also that, what was it with the eunuch, right? With Peter and the eunuch, I believe, right? Where basically he was like, understand what thou readest. And I was like, look, how can I, lest some man teach me? Now, the problem with these individuals is their leaders ain't teaching them the right way. Their leaders ain't teaching them to go into the scriptures, right? Or let me say, or it appears that way, because I ain't in one of them camps. Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, the order for that, okay? In a camp where actually we are expected to go into these things and to, and to actually research, okay, and to study, right? So blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. 1 Peter 3:15, but sanctify the Lord power in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. Okay, because once again, the apostles, I'm bad with names, but the apostles were given the account of one of those guys from one of the other camps, basically getting outdone by one of them. Was it Sarnetta? Right, getting outdone by Sarnetta, and it's like Sarnetta's not even in this thing of ours. He doesn't even Sarnetta identifies as as an African, right? He's stumping someone who's supposed to be, to know these scriptures, right? So we're supposed to have an answer, okay? It's especially when it comes to these scriptures, right? It says Colossians 4:5, walk in wisdom toward them that are without, right? Redeeming the time. Yeah, I thought this was one I wanted before. But yeah, walk in wisdom to them that are without, redeeming the time. Right, John 5:39, search the scriptures, for in them ye think ye have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me. Right, so search the scriptures, right? Look through them. Right, you hear something, you look in the precepts to see if those things is true. Right? And then would you call it? And then if there's something that you don't understand, one or two things happens. You ask your camp, can you, one of the argument in the camp, can you help me understand this, that, and the other, right? But hey, I remember times when, you just had to wait for the Spirit to open your eyes to see it, right? And I remember when coming into this thing, there were certain things I didn't understand, right? Deuteronomy 28:68 being an example of that. Right, I didn't understand what it meant by no man shall buy you. I was like, well, what does this mean? Right, but then through a process of time, right, the Spirit revealed it. Okay. And then it was like, oh, okay, I understand. I see it. Right. I was like, that makes sense. Right, because that's something that the Lord will do sometimes. It's just a thing of like, you just read it, you have faith that one day the Lord will allow you for it to click. Okay, this is Ecclesiastes 7:25. It says, I applied mine heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom. This is King Solomon. Right, now King Solomon was going into all the things. Right, King Solomon was going into all the things, and these are part of this. Is an example that is set before us. Scripture says things written aforetime were written for our learning, right? That we through patience, might have hope. Roughly paraphrase it. Okay. So this is an example of basically going into things, right? So I read that again. I applied mine heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things, and to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness. This is Psalms 119:15. I'll meditate in thy precepts. Right. So thinking about these things, right? Thinking about what it is that someone will be reading. Okay. Going into these scriptures, man. Right, going into these scriptures and not just not just being a parrot. It says, I'll meditate in thy precepts and have respect unto thy ways. Right, and then to end with a warning for these other guys. Right, it says Ephesians 5:6-7. It says, let no man deceive you with vain words. Right, and this is one of the definitions here for vain, kinos, G2:756, right? Empty, vain, devoid of truth, right? So let no man deceive you with words devoid of truth. When you're hearing someone say that the MOTB isn't what we say it is, those are words devoid of truth, right? Don't be deceived by that, right? So because of these things cometh the wrath of the Most High upon the children of disobedience. Be not ye partakers with them. Okay, so as always, Lord's word, I was edifying. Until the next time we say Shalom.